welcome to Wealth Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Reynolds, independent financial advisor and owner of Elevation Financial. Hello, hello. Glad you are with me today. Thanks for joining. All right, we're talking PPP round 2 today. PPP for small business owners. It is the Paycheck Protection Program. Round 2 is out, and I've been hearing a lot of questions about it, a lot of conversations about it from small business owners who are maybe a little bit confused, a little bit have questions about how it works, how is round 2 different, all the stuff around the PPP loan. So let's break it down today. Let's talk through it and let's unpack it, talk about what it is, how it works. I just dropped my pen, so there I can't take any notes. So we'll kind of talk through it. I'll give you some opinion at the end as well about the PPP program and maybe help you hopefully kind of think through if you're going to participate in round 2 or even round 1 as well. So let's get started. All right, let's talk about what the Paycheck Protection Program is. It is called PPP for short. That's how people kind of label it. It is a forgivable loan provided through the CARES Act by the government for coronavirus relief aid. It is designed to provide continuity in compensation for people employed by businesses that are affected by COVID-19, which is obviously a lot of businesses. Again, it's a forgivable loan. It is officially a loan, but there is a stipulation that allows it to be forgiven if you meet certain requirements. We'll talk about those later. So a lot of people are seeing it as not so much a classic loan, but more of, it's not a grant. I want to state that very clearly, but it is a forgivable loan, which means it kind of gets converted to a grant-like entity. So let's talk about round 1 briefly to kind of set the stage to make sure we have some background information. So in round 1, the PPP program was enacted in 2020, and it was pretty popular. About $350 billion was dispersed to small businesses in over 2 weeks, over the course of 2 weeks, rather. So it went pretty quickly. A lot of businesses took advantage of it. A lot of businesses applied for it and got that aid. So that was round 1. In round 2, which was recently passed by Congress in December, I believe it was December, end of last year, $284 billion have been set aside for round 2, an additional $284 billion. So that is obviously a big chunk of money available for small businesses that need help due to decreased revenue and income from COVID-19. So let's talk through the mechanics of it. So $35 billion of that is set aside specifically for small businesses that have never received PPP funding. So there is going to be a certain segment of that money that is designed just for businesses that did not, for whatever reason, take PPP funding before. Either they couldn't get it or they were declined or whatever happened. That is set aside for those businesses. An additional $40 billion is set aside for small businesses with less than 10 employees or employers located in a low-income area seeking less than $250,000. So the interesting thing here is that in the first round of PPP, there was a lot of controversy. A lot of huge companies applied for PPP loans. I'm sure you've heard about the big brands that applied and were under scrutiny and criticized for taking PPP money when it was, in theory, designed for small business. So in round 2, it has been updated a bit to really focus more heavily on truly small businesses. And again, companies or businesses with less than 10 employees is a real focal point of round 2. And so money has been set aside for, very tiny micro businesses, as well as those that are located in low income areas that are looking for a loan of less than $250,000. So the second round of PPP is only available to businesses that are in operation before February 15th, 2020. They must have used up their initial PPP loan, and to be eligible for it, they have to have incurred a 25% or more reduction in revenue in 2020 as compared to 2019. They also must have fewer than 300 employees. Again, this is another stipulation in the round 2 PPP program that says it is really designed for small business, not for huge brands. It's really designed for small and micro businesses that are they make up the majority of our small business landscape, honestly. So it's really designed for smaller firms. Some other factors, just like in round one, the compensation figures for each team member has to be capped at $100,000. They can make more than that, but you cannot use more than $100,000 of annual income in your calculations to apply for the loan. The aid amount is the same as the first round. It's 2.5 times your monthly payroll, which is also owner's draw for Schedule C. But we'll talk about that later. But for single owner businesses that don't run payroll, it's your net income. Or it's 3.5 times for restaurant and hospitality businesses with the NIACS code of 72. So if you're a restaurant or in hospitality under that category, then you get 3.5 times your monthly payroll as a calculation of the loan amount you can get. Everyone else gets 2.5 times. So 2.5 times your monthly payroll. So again, don't get hung up on the word payroll. We'll talk about that in a minute. So actually, one more thing before we move on to that. The deadline to apply for round one and round two is March 31st, 2021. So here's the thing. Round one is reopened. So we have round one and round two open at the same time. So round one was in 2020, last year. It was closed. It has now been reopened. So the entire PPP program has been reopened with a category of round one recipients and a category of round two recipients. And both deadlines to apply are March 31st, 2021. So if you've never received a PPP loan before, then you can apply for round one up until March 31st. If you have received PPP before and you've used up the money in your covered period of 8 to 24 weeks, then you can now apply for round two with that same deadline of March 31st, 2021. So keep that in mind. All right, let's get to some frequently asked questions, some kind of deep dive questions about PPP round two. So what counts as payroll? So W-2 compensation counts as payroll. That's pretty much an obvious one. When you think of payroll, you think of W-2 compensation. So if you're an employer that hires people and they are W-2 employees, then those employees and those amounts would count in your calculation for payroll. If you're putting yourself on payroll and you pay yourself through payroll, then that obviously counts. That's going to be your payroll figure in those calculations. So let's say you're a Schedule C, you're a single member LLC, maybe a sole proprietorship. In this case, what counts as payroll? Just like in round one, your owner's draw counts as payroll. And I shouldn't say that. It's really the net income is the calculation, but I want you to think of it as the compensation you make from the business is equivalent to payroll in this case. But keep in mind, the calculation is not based on what you actually give yourself as a draw. The calculation is based on your net income. So if you're an LLC or a sole proprietorship, which means you're a Schedule C filer, you will use your net income as your calculation of payroll. So for example, let's say you made, I'll just say, round number, $120,000 in net income over the course of 2020. You divide that by 12 for 12 months. And that gives you, $10,000 a month in payroll. Or let's say you made, $50,000 in net income. Well, you divide that by 12, and that gives you the monthly figure that you're going to use to calculate your payroll. Whatever that monthly figure is, you then multiply that by 2.5 or 3.5 if you're a restaurant, for example, but 2.5 for most businesses, and that gives you the amount that you can apply for the PPP loan, round one or two. So if you're an S Corp, here's a caveat. If you're an S Corp, you have to use your W-2 salary. S Corps have to run payroll. So this is kind of a sticky point for some businesses because, and this is a little bit of a tangent, I'm going to try not to soapbox about this too much, but I know a lot of S Corps that it's a single owner S Corp or maybe a small business S Corp, and the owner is trying to pay themselves completely through distributions to avoid payroll taxes. So that is not how an S Corp is supposed to work. An S Corp is supposed to work in the way that it's supposed to work so that you pay yourself payroll as an owner, and you can take some owner's draws, but in general, the payroll should be the bulk of your compensation. But again, I know a lot of business owners that they try to pay themselves all or mostly through distributions and bypass payroll, which means that you are not eligible for PPP with your compensation, because if you're an S Corp, you have to use your W-2 income as your calculation figure. So keep that in mind. One more reason to kind of go by the book and pay yourself properly as an S Corp. All right, so what can the money be used for? Let's talk about that. In round one, it was a little more restrictive. In PPP round two, for the loan to be fully forgiven, you have to use at least 60% of the money toward payroll expenses, which again, compensation counts as payroll. The remaining 40% or less can be used to cover business mortgage or rent payments, business utilities. Additionally, the cost of personal protective equipment or other expenses that are incurred to meet government-imposed COVID restrictions. That is new. That is new as of round two. Also, property damage. The loan can be used to pay for property damage repairs. Cloud computing and supplier costs. This opens it up to a pretty broad spectrum of possibilities. I mean, when you can include supplier costs, in my opinion, that's pretty much covers all sorts of things, pretty much anything that you would pay for in a business. That is maybe paying a vendor or a supplier. Those are going to count and be forgivable if you use the remaining 40% for things like that. So it's much more flexible. You've got a lot more flexibility in your usage for forgiveness in PPP round two. All right, how should you apply? So you're thinking, okay, great. I applied for PPP round one. How do I apply for round two? Same way. Go back to the same bank that you used. That's the best place to do it. So if you used a local bank for round one, go back to that same bank. They have all your paperwork still. It's going to be a much easier process. If you use Cabbage online or Square, do that same process. They already have your information on file. So my advice is to use that same institution you used before. Now, if you had trouble with your previous institution, or maybe they aren't doing round two, I don't know of any institutions that are not doing round two, but let's say you had trouble and you just, for whatever reason, don't want to go back to them, then maybe try a Cabbage or a PayPal or one of the bigger kind of fintech companies that are doing this as well. But my advice is go to the place where you originally got your first loan. And if you haven't gotten it before, if you never got round one and you're applying for the first time, same advice applies. Go to the bank that you have an existing business banking relationship with. You're already a customer. They already have your information. It's going to be a much easier path to apply. All right. Another question. Am I eligible as a 1099 contractor? Yes, you are. As a 1099, you are eligible because as a 1099, you are technically running your own little business. A lot of people don't realize this. A lot of people say, well, I'm a 1099 employee, and they think of themselves as an employee. That's not really the way it works. A 1099 is meant to be you're really operating your own little business. And I have a whole soapbox and a rant about misclassification of 1099s and the whole thing I'm not going to get into, but be aware that if you are a 1099, you are operating your own little business and you are eligible for PPP round one and two. So same as an LLC or a single mobile sole proprietorship, you're going to use your 2019 or 2020 net profit as reported on your Schedule C. Again, divide that by 12 to get your monthly figure, and that's going to give you your amount to multiply by 2.5 or 3.5. All right, can you get the PPP loan if you are not profitable? Some people have been asking, hey, my business was not profitable, but I could still use it. I'm still in need of aid. Can I get PPP? Only if you're running payroll. If you are a Schedule C filer, you're not eligible because you have no net income. You're not profitable. But if you're an S Corp running payroll, and you're paying yourself on payroll, but the business wasn't profitable, you are still eligible because your payroll calculation comes out of literal W-2 payroll that you ran for yourself. So in that case, if you're an S Corp running payroll, you can use those payroll numbers and you're eligible. Otherwise, if you're a Schedule C filer, like most of my clients are and most people I work with, you have to be profitable to be eligible. All right, let's talk about forgiveness. How do you apply for forgiveness? Same general process as round one. There is again a one-page application, just like round one for the smaller loan amounts under 150,000. You apply for forgiveness through your lender. So again, same bank. You're going to apply after your covered period, which is 8 to 24 weeks. And if you're borrowing less than $150,000, which is again I think all of my clients, then you have a one-page simple application to apply, and it's a fairly seamless process, fairly smooth. Pretty much everyone I've worked with has gotten it forgiven. I'm sure there are cases where it has not been forgiven, but I have yet to see a case where it has not been forgiven. And I've worked with people that have always, applied by the book, had clean numbers, it was appropriate, everything was kind of by the book, and they did get it forgiven. So let's talk about, again, I want to go back to the eligibility requirements just for a minute before we get to more of an opinion. So the difference in PPP round two over round one is the eligibility. So round one was more kind of just loose. It was kind of like, hey, you just kind of signed your name and said, hey, I need this. I'm certifying that I need it. Here's my payroll expenses. Like, hey, here's my application. It was a little more loose and less information was required. So with round two, the stipulation is based on your revenue. not your income or payroll. It's your revenue, your overall gross revenue. So they want to see that in 2 quarters, year over year, you're seeing a 25% reduction. So if your Q2 income, Q2 net income, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say income, wrong choice of words, revenue, my mistake. So if your Q2 revenue in 2020 was 25% lower than your Q2 revenue of 2019, then you are eligible. Your books have to reflect this. You have to have clear documentation that your revenue is down by 25% when you compare the 2 quarters across those 2 years. That is the requirement for being eligible for PPP round 2, is that revenue dip of 25% between those 2 years of the same quarter. All right, so should I apply for the PPP round 2 or round 1? Let's talk about, it's kind of same philosophical argument for both. This is a tough one for some people. I can't answer it for you, obviously. It's your decision. But I know that some small business owners are wrestling with the decision. They're wrestling with it and they've never gotten it before. And they're thinking of applying for the first time. Maybe they did take round 1 and they're wrestling with, should I get round 2? And here's some of the phrases I'm hearing. Things like, hey, my business is down, but my partner has income. My household is not hurting, like we have lower income, but we're doing okay. Like, I feel like I don't deserve it. I've heard that phrase before. I've heard people say things like, hey, I feel like it's designed for other businesses that aren't like mine. So I would think through this. Is your revenue down? Is your business affected by COVID-19? If COVID-19 were not a thing, would your business likely be doing better? Would your business likely be on a different trajectory financially than it is today? If that's the case, I would argue you have a reasonable position to take that it's for you. It could be, designed for you. That's kind of who it's built for. So is your revenue and your income down? Has COVID-19 interrupted your business? A lot of us can say yes. Many industries and many small businesses can easily say, well, yes, COVID-19 has absolutely interrupted my business. Even if your household income is not necessarily, in trouble, like maybe you have a partner who has strong income and maybe your business income is down, but it's not necessarily like upending your whole life. I would argue that there's reasonable case to make that, you're ethically still eligible. Your business is down. Maybe you don't necessarily have to have it to survive, but you have a business and that business was interrupted by COVID-19 and you have a valid reason for potentially, thinking you can apply for that and it's built for you. So think about who it's designed to help. I'm not saying you should or should not take it. I know some people are just anti PPP because they don't want to take any kind of government aid, and that's fine. That's a whole philosophical thing. But if you're wrestling with the decision, like, thinking to yourself, hey, I feel like I'm not as, struggling as some other people are, or for whatever reason. Again, think through the reason it's designed for businesses like yours. If your business is down, if your revenue is down, your income is down because of COVID-19, it was designed for a business like yours, most likely. So as long as you meet the eligibility requirements and everything is transparent and by the book, then I think you have a reasonable cause for considering it. Or you don't have to, like, you don't have to listen to me, if you don't feel like it's for you, that's fine too. But I just hate to see people think that it's not for them when they are, the business is designed to help. It's built for very small businesses that are struggling. So that is kind of the scoop on round 2 and a little bit of how round 1 went as well, the PPP program overall. So round 2 has some similarities, some differences, and I hope that is helpful in thinking through, should you apply. Again, the deadline is March 31st. The application process has been streamlined quite a bit. So as a small business borrowing, a modest amount of money, it's a fairly easy process. The application has been fairly smooth and fairly low maintenance for the most part from what I've seen. So with that, I hope that's been helpful. I hope kind of thinking through it has been useful in helping you consider, should you apply or does it make sense for you? So with that, just a reminder, if you have any questions about the PPP program, feel free to grab some time. I'm happy to help, even if we don't end up working together. It's totally fine. You can grab an appointment on my website, which is elevationfinancial.com. there's a big button on the homepage that says book a complimentary money session. And I've had quite a few of these recently where, hey, we're not working together. They don't become a client, but I'm just happy to give them some feedback, answer questions, and send them on their way with some information that is helping them kind of get to the next step in their financial life, or specifically with PPP as well. So reach out, feel free, grab some time if you'd like some help, and I'm happy to chat. With that, have a great day. Thanks for joining us. See you next time. All right, recording is off. Thanks so much for everybody who joined. I see one or two people still on the live. So if you're there and you have any questions, feel free to pop them in chat or in comments, and I'll hang around for a few more seconds. But otherwise, thanks so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.